3, 2, 1.
Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to tell you about the Tricky mod. Basically the history of Tricky as a character, as well as explaining what happens in the mod. Before I get started on that, a message from today's sponsor, me. Yeah, that's right, I'm sponsoring my own video. Channel memberships are now available. You want a little funky badge next to your name? You want an exclusive role in my Discord server? Well, for like $3, you get all that and not much more. But hey, if you like the Blue Stop Sign channel and want to support me, feel free to check it out. Oh, and also, if any part of this video is helpful, consider subscribing. Okay, let's get started with the video. Tricky, one of the most well-known Friday Night Funkin mods, originates from Madness Combat, a flash animation series that started in 2002 that over time established itself in Newgrounds culture. You know, that funny website logo you see every time you open Friday Night Funkin'? Anyways, before I get into the history of Tricky and everything to do with the mod, a quick disclaimer. There's a lot of story behind Madness Combat. We're talking like over a decade's worth. Because of this, I'm just going to give you the general idea of it all, so I'm sorry if it's confusing at times. In Madness Combat, Tricky is one of the main established antagonists of Hank J. Wimbledon. Who is Hank? Well, he is eventually coming to the actual Friday Night Funkin' game, so I think I can save that for another day. All you need to know is that he likes to fight. A lot. Skipping over a bit of previous history, when Tricky was hired to take down Hank, he just looked like a regular old clown. As the two of them fought, Hank eventually impales him with a stop sign. Looks familiar, huh? Well, after Tricky was revived by what's called the higher powers, turning him into a zombie, this stop sign that Hank killed him with became his weapon of choice. This is why we see it in the FNF mod. More on that later though. In the 4th episode of Madness Combat, we see Tricky has become a DJ. At the end of the episode, when everyone is dead, Tricky just shrugs it off and puts on the chicken dance tune. This is why the title screen for the mod is him dancing along to it. This is also when we see Tricky's mask for the first time. In the 5th episode of Madness Combat, Tricky makes his entrance into the scene through a thin gap in the ground alongside his iconic sign, just like the initial cutscene in the FNF mod. Anyways, Tricky is shot in the face by Hank and he goes back down. When he comes back up, however, he has been enraged. This parallels with the FNF mod again, as after Improbable Outset, Tricky is shot by Hank and his mask falls off. Well, what is making Tricky so angry, other than being shot in the face? Well, it's a little something called the Portable Improbability Drive, a device inside of Tricky that when activated, gives him immense power. During Improbable Outset, Tricky is only shaking slightly because the device is turned off. Hank shooting him, however, caused it to activate, this being the reason why Madness is so much harder than Improbable Outset. Also, the static that is seen in Madness is a result of the Improbability Drive. Anyways, after Madness, we are met with this cutscene. Now, this obviously leads into Tricky becoming the demon monster you've all been waiting to hear about, but I want to point out another parallel to the Madness Combat series. Tricky says, "You do not kill Clown. Clown kills you." This is what Tricky says to Hank before pummeling him to death, after the top of his head was chopped off by him. This is basically the indicator that Tricky is very, very angry. At the end of the 6th episode of Madness Combat, Tricky is shot by Hank many times in the chest. The Improbability Drive then basically reaches max capacity and transforms Tricky into the demon form from the 3rd song, Hell Clown. In the FNF mod, it seems Tricky transformed more so out of anger, and I guess to make the reference to this episode. Now, they obviously look quite different, one having white flames and the other having a violet red, but there is an explanation. In Madness combat, fire is often white instead of red or orange. I don't know if there's a specific reason, but it's likely to fit the color scheme. Anyways, Tricky's design choices for the mod seem to come from the game Madness Accelerant, a game where you fight Demon Tricky the same way Hank did in the 7th episode. We can see the black fingernails, red skin, and red flames, this clearly being what it's based off. But hey, the Tricky on the health bar is completely white, so I guess the mod references both the colors from the series and Madness Accelerant. Anyways, guess it's time to talk about the ending cutscene for the mod. Up to this point, I've really had nothing to tell you about except the references throughout the mod, the reason why Tricky is quote-unquote angry, blah blah blah. But now things get interesting. In the cutscene, we see Tricky getting attacked by Hank. Hank unfortunately not being too prepared and not having any ammo in his revolver, leaving Boyfriend on his own. Luckily for Boyfriend though, a mysterious force takes Tricky away. Now, we see a character known as the Auditor observing the situation from what I assume to be his improbability drive. You see, the Auditor is the main antagonist of the Madness Combat series, and basically watches over and controls everything. Anyways, the screen flashes of Familiar Eye, and then goes static. We can see the Auditor is confused by this, raising an eyebrow, because obviously he assumed himself to be the one in control. Well, what is that eye? We've seen it before in the Hex mod, when Hex was being hacked by someone at the end, as well as an eye in the background of the Witty mod. Well, this seems to be how CadeDev is linking together the more prominent mods he works on. BanBuds, the creator of the Tricky mod, said himself in a recent Q&A that it was the quote-unquote Hex cult.
I just thought it would be cool to have like maybe some mysterious shit happening in the background. And I also read that people were concerned that Convict will also be pulled into the whole cult thing with Hex.
Well, who is this cult? If I'm not mistaken, it is the same cult that is trying to capture Witty, being known as the Greater Good. Turns out my Witty Explained video from like 3 months ago was either really inaccurate or just a prototype of the original story, as the cult did not create Witty and does not want him to destroy the world. No, they think Witty will cause harm as a result of how powerful he is, this being why he hides. The leader of this cult is known as Updike, a funny looking cloud man. He is a new addition to the Witty mod, his song being called Remorse. In said song, we see Girlfriend being tied up in the back. The inspiration behind this is likely that Girlfriend was revealed to be a demon in week 7, therefore making her a threat, something the Greater Good would want to capture. However, people have pointed out the song is likely called Remorse, because Updike seems to be a monster himself, and only harms those who might be a threat because, well, it's for the greater good of everyone's survival. It seems his remorse for his actions don't matter though, as at the end of the cutscene we see Tricky lying face down in a dark, bland looking room, likely being captured by Updike. Well, now it's all good, right? You understand that Hex was trying to be hacked by the cult because he is a friend of Witty, and Tricky was captured because he is obviously a massive threat when he is a demon. Not really. With the cancellation of the Witty mod, only one more update coming before its eventual deletion, things have been uncertain. Where will Updike fit into the story anymore? Perhaps this cult from the Hex and Tricky mods respectively is not related to Witty at all? BanBuds did say in his recent Q&A that it is very unlikely the Tricky mod is continuing, so perhaps this is the end of the story altogether? I guess we'll have to see. Sorry for going on such a tangent there. It's just interesting to try and understand this whole mysterious cult thing. Anyways, I obviously need to talk about Expogation. The song itself is based around the episode with the same name, episode 11. We see an odd form of Tricky, this being the skeletal Tricky from this episode. We see minions popping up from the ground, messing with Boyfriend by putting up stop signs in front of the notes and dragging the health bar. Text pops up similar to Madness, with Tricky screaming his confusion and being unable to kill Boyfriend. The likely story is that Tricky can't kill Boyfriend because of what I'm going to call the rules of Friday Night Funkin. There have been countless mods and even moments from the main game where the opponent wants Boyfriend dead, but there's nothing they can do about it. I guess if Boyfriend starts singing, the opponent doesn't have a choice but to join in or something. Tricky, however, breaks the rules the only way he can, having the previously stated stop signs in the way, has one of the minions drag the health bar and insta-killing Halo notes. Speaking of the Halo and the notes, as well as the one Tricky is wearing, they have an interesting story, so I recommend watching Madness Combat to find out more about them. Anyways, BenBuds said in his recent Q&A that Expogation only existed to be an extra phase with more difficulty. It's obviously not canon to the mod itself, as Tricky has been captured. It's still a really cool song though, having an iconic moment from the Madness Combat series where Tricky screams. Really cool stuff. Anyways, I think I've explained everything you need to understand about Tricky. I do however recommend you watch the Madness Combat series. As I said at the start of the video, I've left out the majority of the greater details. I'm excited to talk about Madness again when Hank comes to the game, but I guess we'll just have to wait until then. Phantom Arcade is apparently going to be at E3 showing off Week 8 though. This might be a joke, but consider how popular Friday Night Funkin is. There is every possibility this might actually happen in the coming days, so I guess we'll have to be on the lookout. Alright, that's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. This was definitely one of my favourite videos I've made so far. Consider subscribing if you found any of this informative, and maybe join the Discord. See you in the next one. Bye!